It is my absolute pleasure and honor to introduce you to our guest for today. Professor Krisler Bailey is an incredible college transition coach, professor, and someone that I've admired in this space for a long time. Thank you for joining us on the Literacy Landscapes podcast. What would you like the audience to know about you?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk with you. I love what you are doing, and I'm really psyched about this conversation. So, I, like you said, am a professor and I do executive function and coaching and health coaching as well. And outside of that, I am a wife and a boy mom. I have two boys. And so, in that, getting prepared for all of this too. So I'm looking at this from the educator side and from the parent side as well. That's always really interesting when you're teeter-tottering between both.
Thank you for sharing that. I actually am in the same space. I have one girl and one boy, one in college and one going to college. I've been in education for 20 plus years, although I joke that I'm 27 forever. The truth of the matter is, it's been a minute. And it wasn't until I had my own son as a college freshman who was so academically talented and smart, but I realized I was spending an inordinate amount of time making sure I got him like the perfect sheets and realized there were things that I should have also focused on that could have made the transition a lot easier. I love that you tie in your executive functioning, health and wellness, and your transition. I feel like they're all connected in so many. What would you say are some challenges that students face as they're looking at the high school to college transition?
Oh, goodness.
You know,
Many that I've seen. Like you, I have been in education for over 20. I just
mhm.
finished my 23rd
Wow.
academic year as a college professor. I never thought I would say that. Never say never. For challenges, one of them is students doing things on their own.
Mm,
Living independently is something they are not really prepared for. I did an in-house survey
mm,
with students I'd had over the last 3 to 4 years, asking them about their first year experience. Living independently was the number one answer. I got over 240 responses back.
wow.
And that was the number one answer that students said they struggled with, was that aspect of their first year of college. A lot of it was decision making.
Mm,
They are the ones that have to decide what to do and when to do it. That could be when to get up in the morning,
mm,
when to eat, what to eat. It could be how to structure their day. It could be things like going to the doctor, making
yeah.
appointments, all of these things that they had somebody else doing for them for so long. And now that they are somewhat on their own, they're realizing they
Yes.
have to be doing these things. And oh crap, how do I do that?
Yeah. That's such an excellent point. I also do high school to college transition coaching, and I've been working on this book for educators to support them. How do we support students? We talk about teaching the whole learner, right? What does that actually look like? Gradually scaffolding that independence, that executive functioning, and that self efficacy that I think students really struggle with right now. And we know there are a number of reasons, a post COVID world, social media. There are so many reasons. It's not one thing. I think there's no one reason why students are struggling more now, but they are. I also find that it's timing. It's when, it's the what, like you said, and it's also the when. How much time will it take me to complete an assignment? I find that especially college freshmen often underestimate how much time it might take them to write an essay, or they'll see a syllabus and get really overwhelmed with, oh my gosh, I have all these things and then I have five other classes. How do I pace myself? What does this look like over a week, 2 weeks? And then some students also managing jobs, life. It's a lot. And I find that it is an area where they need a lot of help.
It is really interesting, what they start to realize they are missing. It's
Mhm.
almost like they didn't realize what they had until they got to college. Now
Yeah.
they don't have that
Yeah.
support system, they don't have that network that they've been so dependent on. Now they have to do it for themselves. I'm working with a young man who is a junior. He
Mm,
has been in school for a while, but he still has
mhm,
not created those habits for himself. We
mhm.
just started working on getting him a planner and getting those classes in his planner and due dates and things like that. As I was saying to him, your professors are going to expect you to spend 2 to 3 hours per
Yeah,
credit hour per week on homework, studying, and so forth. He was just silent.
yeah.
And I was like, hello, are you there? And I don't
Yes.
think he realized that is the expectation. When you go to college, this is your job, essentially. Think of this as your workplace. You make sure you show up on time, you may
Mhm.
communicate with your employer. But if you've never had a job, then you don't know those things, right? So there's just a lot of things that they're not aware of, that they've never experienced before, and that professors are expecting of them that they just don't have the skill for yet. And so, again, this is where you and I come in. We help to bridge that gap and make that transition a little bit smoother.
Some students need it more than others, and
Yes.
that's okay. And what each student needs is also highly individualized. I've had one student who a big part of the work I did was like on the communication piece, communicating with colleagues, if it was a group project, or if she was absent, communicating with the professor. It was things like that. I call them pebbles in your shoe. If there's one pebble, it's really hard to walk. And it was just a
Mhm.
pebble in her shoe that we worked on. So, what are some sentence stems we can use that could help you in writing an email or initiating a conversation with a classmate? I think there's a social piece in addition to the academic planning piece as well. And sometimes they're interrelated.
It's really interesting. Students struggle with that connectivity
Yeah,
with professors. Not every professor is warm and fuzzy. A lot of them are not,
right.
especially at certain types of
Mm-hmm.
institutions. So maybe they're a little bit more cautionary with those professors, but it is still important to communicate well in person as well as through email. The in person piece seems to be extra difficult.
Yes.
Going to a professor and saying, I don't know something,
Yeah.
is very difficult for students. That is something I work on with students as
Mm-hmm.
well. If you go to office hours, what do you say? How do I start the conversation? What questions do I ask? Even those types of things are things that students struggle with because they don't know. They've never been in that position. Maybe it's because their parents have always been the ones communicating on their behalf. Maybe
Yeah.
they've always been at the top of their class and never really had to ask questions
Correct.
before. And that is so difficult.
Yeah.
When you go to college, you're not in the top 5% anymore, 10% anymore. You're in a much bigger pond. You're in the ocean for some of them.
Yes.
And if you've never had to do that because you've been top of your class,
Yeah.
somebody else has been doing that on your behalf.
I'm having a scratchy throat and I think my allergy meds have worn off. I agree with you. I also see some professors having trouble during office hours too, engaging in that conversation. I actually am working on a book. I'm really hopeful that it'll be published eventually, but it literally has some kind of conversation starters for both students and instructors to help guide that because I have experienced students coming to me and not even knowing what to ask. So my first question is, did you review the assignment? Do you have questions about it or are you stuck on? Sometimes students don't even know what to ask. And I'm breaking that apart for them too,
Mhm.
helping them to understand at what point should they reach out. Is it too soon? Have you read the assignment? Have you tried to break it down so you could come prepared? I always say to students, and if I'm coaching instructors, come prepared to your meetings. I just met with a student who's struggling. I teach a module class, it's a full semester in 7.5 weeks. So you can
Wow.
imagine it's 2 weeks in one. If you miss a week, it's breathtaking for students. I had this talk with the student and we came up with a plan, but the student at first didn't even, it was a tough conversation. She didn't even know where to start. So helping the students, equipping the students with the tools, but also I made sure I was prepared for that meeting so I could go over an assignment that she really struggled with. So I think it's important on the part of the instructor to also, I prepare for my meetings, but also for the students to prepare. Like the more you can prepare, I think the more you get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Instructors being curious about their students is really important. We are real people,
Yeah.
and we want our supervisors to know that we are dealing with struggles or to celebrate with us.
Yeah.
And that can happen between a professor and a student. If you are curious about your students,
Yeah.
meaning when they come to you and ask about the assignment, maybe ask them something else like, how's your semester going? What other classes are you taking? Are you new to the school? Have you made friends yet? You don't have to get super personal, but just being able to have a general, authentic
Yeah.
conversation takes the student from being super nervous and
Yeah.
awkward and calming them down a little bit, bringing them to a place where they feel comfortable sitting down. I have so many that will come to my office and won't sit down. And I'm like, it's okay. You can
Oh,
take your backpack off. You can sit down, stay for a minute. We can have a conversation. But if you're willing to ask them questions about
yeah.
themselves and be curious about them,
Mhm.
it does calm them down a little bit for them to go, okay, I can do this.
It really does. I always do a beginning of semester survey with my students, and then even I'll ask a question like favorite movie or book. I love that some of my students like The Goonies and The Princess Bride. We have something to connect on. Those little moments can make a big difference, I think, for sure, because the student feels like they're not just like I went to a large city university system, so I felt very often like I was just a social security number. And I
Mm,
don't want my students to feel that way. Even if it's a large system, I want them to know I hear you. It can be scary for a student. I remember needing help and the professor sending me out, go get an ice cream. She didn't even know what I wanted. And I don't think she knew how to help me. It was the most awkward conversation I'd ever had. She was like, it's beautiful out. Go get an ice cream. I needed help on my paper, the communication, and face to face is really hard. I've had students afraid to come to group study sessions with professors, and I talk about comparison culture all the time. I feel like students right now are in a position where they're always on social media comparing themselves, both academically, but also in terms of their belongings, what they're wearing, where they're vacationing, what they're doing. There's a lot of comparison culture out there that I think can make a student feel self conscious, although they shouldn't.
it's huge.
Yeah.
I've had several that say, it seems like everybody else is, and fill
Yes,
in the blank with
for
they
sure.
think everybody else is doing. And I'm like, we live on a planet with 8 billion people. You are absolutely not the only one who is doing
Exactly.
that. You are on a college campus with thousands of other students. You
Mm-hmm.
are not the only one who is feeling that way,
Yeah.
looking that way, experiencing that thing.
And just thinking back, I think students start their college experience having this vision of what college is, often from movies or TV shows, and the reality is really different. One of the things that I recommend to my students from the very beginning and to their parents, because there's a piece where the students have to take a little bit more ownership when they're
Hmm.
leaving the house. But there were things that I didn't realize as a college mom to a freshman that were important. For example, I should have downloaded that academic calendar while I was buying my son 25 pillows. We joke all the time, like we had to put some in storage. That academic calendar would have helped us plan when are you coming back for Thanksgiving? When are you coming back for the holidays? Tickets sell out really fast. My son had to take a train back home. Tickets go up in price. If you can help your child get ahead of it, and they take the ownership on the planning, right? That communication piece with your parents and that planning is ahead of the curve. I think that first semester can also be a little bit smoother. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Asking them
Mm-hmm.
things like, here's where you have a break. What
Yeah,
would you like to do on your break? Not the expectation that they're going to come home on break because they may get to college, find their people,
yeah,
and they want to stay on campus.
yeah,
Or maybe they realize there's going to be activities that they want to be involved in. What do you want your breaks to look like? We would love to see you. Would you like to stay on campus this break and come
yeah.
home this break? When they come home,
Mhm.
it's a whole new dynamic. Preparing yourself, thinking about what that's going to be like. They're going to be in college at parties, up at 3 a.m., doing things they may not have done at home. Thinking about that whole dynamic
Mhm.
is something that you are going to want to do and prepare
Yeah,
yourself as the parent for. If you have a spouse or significant other, have that conversation. What are your expectations? Try to have that conversation with your kiddo. We love that you're headed off to college. We want you to come home as much as
Hmm.
possible, or maybe you don't. We want you to
Hmm.
experience college and enjoy it. We don't want you to feel like you have to come home.
Yeah.
But those are the types of things that end up maybe being little wedges, little cracks. People don't think about those things in advance.
Such a good point. I love this, like managing your expectations, but also having that conversation because the parent and the child may be on two different planes. Having that open conversation can be really helpful and offset things before they become bigger. Why aren't you coming home? And why aren't you calling? We found it helpful to have a set time, like Sunday afternoons was our FaceTime, and it was initiated, right? It's my son's Max. Like, when should we what is it, what works for you, right? I think just having those touch points was really helpful, especially at the beginning. Now it's more of just like a casual texting daily, but at the beginning we had more kind of substantial, and occasionally he just FaceTimes me and I pretend not to act too excited. At the very beginning, it's that transition point that's really tough in different ways that you may not anticipate. You may think the child is ready to go, and it may be something you don't expect. And it's small things too that we didn't think about. My son is upstate, and not a lot of places take our health insurance upstate. What do we do if my son's really sick? That was something that came up. Some planning in advance can offset a little bit of the stresses that a parent and a child can experience. My son was really sick. And we didn't want him in a position where he was panicking, and I'm like sending him random doctors that might take his insurance and call it. And then he's over 18, so there is a limited amount of information I can share without permission. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing all that.
that is so important. The filling out of forms,
Yeah.
they're going to have to do
Yes.
that on their own because
Yes.
it's not like they're going to be sending you the form to fill out and you send it. I was at the DMV yesterday renewing my driver's license, and there were so many teenagers getting their license for the first time. It was really cute. But I noticed the parent
Mm,
was filling out the form for them.
yeah.
And I just thought, man, these kids, 16 years old, you need to
Yeah.
start, even if you don't know all the answers, filling out these forms because you're going to be filling out forms for the rest of your life.
Oh, yeah.
So if you don't start now, you're going to be in a position where you're like, oh, there's just things you got to know. You got to know your social, your driver's license number, your student ID.
Yeah.
I would also suggest knowing things like your debit card number. We think, oh, it's saved in my Amazon list or whatever, but what if it's not? We're
Hmm.
so dependent on other things to do it for us. How, you can't memorize 16 numbers? I think you can. Just a few phone numbers. What happens if your phone gets lost and you don't know phone numbers that you need to get in touch with somebody? We think, oh, it'll never happen or it's not that
Hmm.
big of a deal. But if you just have these few
Yeah.
tools, it's so much less stressful. And so if you're a high schooler listening to this and you're about to head off to college, I'm
Yeah.
telling you right now,
Mhm.
you got 2.5 months to start remembering these numbers. Practice a little bit every day. You get to college, you know the information, and now you don't have to keep calling mom or dad or
Yeah.
grandma on how to fill out a form. Find a doctor before they go to school. If your child already has a mental health practitioner they work with, make sure they can stay in contact with that person. Do they offer virtual visits? Is there a way to connect with them via email or through some
Hmm.
sort of client portal? Let them set up the portal.
Yeah.
They need to know how to access that person. These are the things you do now in this period between graduation and headed off to college that you set them up for success so that when they head off, they're more comfortable. And as the parent, so are you.
Thank you for bringing up the mental health piece because it's a big one. And a recent survey came out. I don't know if you saw, I think I put a post about it, but there's a global happiness survey, and young people right now are not as happy as they were. Mental health issues are increasingly an issue, especially in a post COVID world. We know we're living in a very complicated time right now where there's a
Mhm.
lot going on. In addition to, if a student has a mental health counselor, if I'm working with someone who's just about to start college, I make sure they bookmark and write down the health services and mental health services number. There's a hotline for every university, every college somewhere even if it's on a sticky note that they put on their wall, in the event of an emergency, when you're spiraling, you don't want to go fishing. It's really hard. Make sure you have the tools surrounding you.
Every college is going to have some service
Correct.
available. And if they don't have it directly on campus, they oftentimes have referrals where you can connect with somebody who you can contact and work with. Know what the resources are on your campus, have it written down, save it in your phone, whatever you can do to have it right there at your fingertips. We don't want you to have those struggles, but we are well aware that
Yeah.
people have those struggles. The better prepared you are,
Yeah.
the better the outcome will likely be.
Yeah, and for sure. I recommend to professors. I experienced it myself as an instructor. I had a student absent consecutively for 2 weeks. I reached out to their counselor. It turned out it was a big mental health issue. And I ended up calling, our university had a hotline, and I was able to say, hey, can you do a wellness check on this student? For instructors, if you see a pattern of attendance issues, there may be something else going on. I just
Mhm.
always recommend send a little alert, a little note to the advisor, because you really never know what a student's going through, and it could be significant.
Mhm. Yeah, my university has a place where we can report those students. If we have a concern, if something has happened, we can report the incident. But if we just have a concern, the wellness check, we can do that and the university will follow up. It has been really helpful because sometimes it's the student just not being a good student. And sometimes it's the student is really struggling and they need additional support.
Yeah. Yeah, I interviewed one of my seasons, Dean Tolson, a former basketball player who wrote a beautiful book about his journey as a student athlete who struggled with literacy, ended up really struggling, and eventually got his MBA. In the process, he realized he got an A in not showing up. And he said that absolutely didn't help him. If there's one thing you want to do as a student, just show up, no matter how hard it is. And I would add, because I'm a student, I would say it was a little on the neurospicy end. Sometimes I need to put supports in place to make sure I'm fully focused, my attention is there and locked in. I sit up front. I know myself better because I'm Daydream Daisy. I'm very easily distracting my own self, whether it's with a
Mhm.
song or a task I need to do. I sit up front. I make sure to have my own note taking system. It's what got me through my doctoral studies. Knowing yourself as a learner is really important. You got to show up.
And butt in the seat is not showing up. Because you can have your butt in the seat all day and you're not doing anything. Be fully present.
Be present.
Eye contact, ask questions, answer questions, take notes.
No online
Please,
shopping.
the online shop, what cracks me up is they think we don't know
We know.
because we can see it. It's written all over your face. You found that cute dress. And now somebody else, not just you, is
That's
distracted.
right.
Your classmates are
That's right.
distracted. They want to know where you got the cute dress from. What website is that? I find that students don't really understand that there is a difference in high school attendance and
That's right.
college attendance. In high school, you show up, you get the grade. In college, you show up, you may or may not get the grade. Some professors have an attendance policy, some do not. I
Yeah.
don't have an attendance policy because you supposed to be in class. So you're not going to get points for just putting your booty in the seat. You're going to
You got to
earn
work.
points by demonstrating mastery of the content. And that comes in a variety of ways.
Mm.
When you are fully present, when you are engaging in the material in the class with the discussion, that is where you really gain a lot more from the class. Back to our earlier conversation about what to say to your professor when you go to
Yeah.
office hours. If you're fully present, then you know what you missed. I didn't get that definition.
Yeah.
Or you mentioned that formula and I didn't quite understand it. Can you explain it? That gives you material that you can take back to your professor or to the TA and start asking those questions or get your
Mm-hmm.
concerns addressed.
Oh my gosh. I feel like we could talk for the next 9 hours. I'm nodding my head. I know my podcast is mostly audio only. We may have some clips, but I'm just nodding my head this entire conversation. And I think one thing that I have also witnessed, and an area that I think students need direct instruction in thinking about the literacies of college is on that note taking. That's a really big one. It's how to take effective notes. Also, it's the study skills. It's how to best study. Just reading a textbook isn't going to do it for me. I could read that book front and cover and fail that test. Just because I'm sitting there and staring at a book doesn't mean it's gelling.
I think students assume that since your professor knows the material, they have it all together, they don't really understand the struggles that the students are having. I struggled with reading comprehension from the time that I was in elementary school. That was the score that I consistently got lower in. In college, I realized that was my problem, but I didn't really understand what that meant until I got to college. You should see my notes from freshman year versus junior year. For students, we get it. We understand those things. You still have to work through that. And that comes back to our earlier conversation of breaking down your time in your day. When you're studying for 3 hours at a time, that is not going to be helpful for you. Knowing how to have those study blocks, knowing what to do during your study blocks, whether you're going to use physical flashcards, a flashcard app, rewrite your notes, brain dump, use Cornell notes or an outline. There's a variety of things that you can utilize. And just because your neighbor or your classmate or your roommate does things one way doesn't mean it's going to work for you. You have to find the methods that are going to work for you. Just because you study for biology one way doesn't mean it's going to work for psychology or sociology. You may have to switch things up. And this also takes me back to the conversation with your professor. That can also be a question you ask. I'm really having a hard time studying for this, or I don't seem to be taking the right notes. What suggestions do you have? What have students done in the past that has helped them be successful in this class?
Oh, that's good. That is a good one. Jot that down. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's amazing. I always was a strong reading comprehension person, but math was my challenge. And I would run out of the classroom and lie to myself and say, I'll get it later. I'll figure it out later. And then one day I realized I have to stop lying to myself because this is not helping me. I need to ask a question before I leave the classroom or write down the question so that I can keep making those connections that I need to make.
Absolutely. I might start implementing with my students. You just gave me an idea. I teach sociology and we deal with a lot of definitions, a little bit of history, sociological concepts, and sociological theory. There's a lot of information. Students may not realize or they may not be comfortable asking the question in front of everybody. So I may suggest to them have a notes page and then have a questions page. As you're taking notes, if you think of a question, jot it down. That way, either with your classmates as you're studying together or during office hours, you want to come back and talk with the professor, or if they have a review session, you've got your questions already set. So you don't have to flip back through your notes. You've got those questions set and ready to go.
Professor Krisler, I love a good acronym. And my book is based on an acronym. I think you've got a WQRT right there. It's writing questions right then.
I love it.
I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Is there one last thing you'd like to share with the audience before we close?
I just want to remind you that grades are not everything. You are not your grade. And I have a question I would love to leave the students with. How would people, your parents, your professors know that you are a good student if grades didn't exist? How would they know?
Thank you so much. I feel like we could talk for hours. This was amazing. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation. And I totally agree. We probably could go on for many more. Maybe we should have a part 2 to this conversation.
I think